Welcome to the presentation. Let's get going. So again, collaboration with NAMCC has been wonderful, as an individual, as a consultant in the space, and also as the president of the County Genealogy Historical Society. So I'm blessed to do that. Contact information, if you want to come visit them in person, she didn't mention that, Wednesday through Saturday, 9 to 4, they're available to service you. And you can make by appointment their archives. That's going to be helpful. So as you're on this journey, I always open my presentations with a quote. And this one I'm going to say is: a people without the knowledge of their past, history, and origin and culture is a tree without roots. And that was from Marcus Garvey. And actually, this is a picture of Marcus Garvey, which I enjoy sharing. It is not typically what you see when you think about Marcus Garvey. So there he is, ready to represent. So from our presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of family reunions from African Americans in the United States. I'm going to give you my definition of what a family historian is, and I hope you align with that. We're going to talk a little bit about some family reunion essentials, some family story essentials. I'll share a brief glimpse of online and offline sources. Remember, you'll get a bundle of materials just for participating today, so I'm glad you're here. And we'll have some room for Q&A. And as Geraldine mentioned, if you want Q&A, put it in the Q&A section of the application so that she can see those and field those. So let's talk a little bit about Black family reunion history here in the United States. Black family reunions have an origin and a meaning for our freedom-seeking ancestors from the time of the end of the Civil War. There are many families, because of our freedom-seeking ancestors, that were separated by bondage and other extenuating circumstances. And so it was very important for them, once the Civil War was over and they became citizens, to reunite with family that had been separated in the enslaved experience. And so at that time, you would see a lot of opportunities. People would run ads in papers and newspapers looking for lost kin and try to reunite with them physically, in person. And so that's where we start our journey in terms of family reunions. Also, our colored troops, when the regiments would get together. Many of you may know something about the Grand Army of the Republic as an example. There started to be reunions of regiments and infantry of military colored troops that fought together, that came from various geographies and came together for a cause. And so they would also have times where they would reunite. So freedom seekers moving to freedom of expression in the late 19th century. And these type of reunions, Memorial Day was one of the things that would happen in May, where soldiers would be in remembrance of what had happened on the battlefield for the Civil War. And so people started having these gatherings, not necessarily individual families, but corporately, around those experiences, all the way until this became quite the experience of the day. We had a situation in 1893 that was designated the World Columbian Exposition was organized in Chicago. And that was for the anniversary of the discovery, we all know, discovery of America, celebrating Christopher Columbus's voyage. Well, that exhibition wasn't actually designed for us, even though we had 27 million visitors from around the world coming to the United States. The message was clear that, we had a separate but equal experience. We were welcome to work there, but not necessarily be patrons of the exhibition. And so one day was designated August 25th in 1893 of Colored American Day. And this was a time where our ancestors gathered at this international exhibition to speak. Frederick Douglass and other people of the day came, and we had oratory contests and exhibits of the talent and culture and identity of people of color in the United States. So things continued as we had the Great Migration. The first Great Migration from the South, as people moved into the North to migrant cities from 1915 to 1940. That migration pattern from rural to urban centers created new communities of our ancestors, and also another opportunity for people to connect. And so people began to have gatherings as it related to the geography. So if you were in Chicago, for example, and you were from Mississippi, there became organizations and clubs that would be reunions and celebrate. Say if you were from Greenville and you came, and there would be things that would be organized over the summers where people would gather and do those commemorations. From the 1940s, and we moved into World War II, we started having, and actually that started in the 19th century, but we started having meetings after the meeting, is what I will call it. So whether we had faith-based organizations or business organizations, like the National Medical Association, we had the Masons. I have a picture of the Masons, Freemasons. We had organizations like the Negro Women, National Council of Negro Women, the Colored Women's Clubs. We had the historically Black fraternities and sororities. Oftentimes, there would be meetings and gatherings of members of the organizations afterwards. And so these traditions started moving down into the family unit. Similarly, as we started recreating and being travel and leisure in different parts of our states and communities, there would be these times where people would have these family connections and gatherings as descendants, and we were able to stay connected as communities. Then people started to have these gatherings when they would recreate and go on vacation. And so fast forward to the 1970s, and we had this watershed event in music also around the same time. But in 1977, we had the TV broadcast of the Alex Haley's epic book called Roots, the Saga of an American Family. And many people gathered around and watched all of that series. And from there, Roots 1, Part 2, people started gathering and doing this thing called family history and family reunions. So that set a foundation for a lot of different things. By 1986, we had started the National Black Family Reunion Movement, which was, again, a vision of Dorothy Height, the national president of the National Council of Negro Women. By 1980, Juneteenth had become a state holiday in Texas. And we have a variety of corporate sponsorships and partnerships within the Black community that would commemorate the sense of identity and space and place at different places. So one of the places here in the Midwest, here near Ohio, is Cincinnati. We have the Cincinnati, which is now called the Midwest Family Reunion, and then there's the National Reunion, that's usually in August. But from then on, we started seeing more and more investment of family reunions, or those archetypes. So we had the Tom Joyner family reunion. There's just various like I said, corporate sponsorships that, Procter and Gamble and other corporations started to invest in family reunion initiatives. And then we started seeing by the 2020s, where we are now, 2021, obviously former President Biden, federal holiday, Juneteenth became a federal holiday. And now we have, in earnest, people celebrating Juneteenth or having family units gathered, and we full-fledged have people that are interested, such as myself and others, that are interested in reclaiming their identity, their ancestry, and we do this through family gatherings known as reunions. So that's a brief history of Black family reunions here in the United States. So why a family reunion? There are several reasons what a family reunion serves purpose, especially those families that have been doing them for decades and generations. It's an opportunity for the various generations across the family to communicate. It's a place where you can showcase the traditions of a family and with the rituals, and not just, the traditions of that particular family, if they, over time where they've gone. So if they've moved from the city to the country or vice versa, it's an opportunity to express those traditions. It's also an opportunity to express our culture as African Americans, Black Americans, however you choose to identify yourself. Cultural expression. It's also an opportunity to transmit our identities as a family, as expressing what that identity is in the social context of the time, which may have evolved over time, but in many ways has stayed the same. And so the way to document and memorialize it is through the family reunion. It's also an opportunity to celebrate one another and recognize family contributions from year to year or biennially, or how often you ever celebrate. And last but not least, which a lot of people don't think about, it is also an opportunity to transfer family resources. And by that, I mean talent, economics, information that's based on survival and sustaining family legacies. You learn those things through the family reunion and the experience of communicating that event. So whether they take place in overseas, a destination reunion or whatever, the fact that family resources are transferred, emotionally, economically, and so on and so forth through the family reunion experience. So that brings me to a family historian. So what is a family historian? You may or may not aspire to being that. You may by default, it have been placed on you to do the needful for your family. So this is my definition. I think it's multifaceted, right? Family historian is a lineage specialist. What is a lineage specialist? A person who understands from generation to generation how people have arrived and come through till to 2025. So you are a lineage specialist specializing in the relationships from family to family. A family historian is also a researcher. They are going to have to do some homework about understanding the stories and the documentation, the old photos, the old information or artifacts that they may have gathered over time, and find out what those connections exactly are, if they still exist in the various branches of a family tree. They are also a memory maker. If there's a family reunion, there's a recording of the events. There's an opportunity to create memories for people who previously have not made connections with one another. You're also a retainer of those memories, a memory keeper. And last but not least, which people know, often the family historian, they may themselves or appoint a proxy, becomes a storyteller for the family unit. What I want you all to remember, honestly, a reunion without any family history is just a cookout. So let's be clear. So if you're just coming together and nobody's talking about the family, the eldest ancestor, how they all arrived, how you got your surname, how you ended up living in the Midwest, as an example, it is just simply a cookout, something where people gathered and had something to eat. So I want to talk about 5 things that are very important in this space. And I call it the high 5 because regardless of what kind of family reunion that you decide to have or set up, you're going to have to start with what you know. What do you know about your family? Do you know who the oldest surviving relative is? Do you know where they lived? Do you know where they grew up? Do you know who your grandparents' names are, where they were born, or your great grandparents? Some people, you'd be surprised how little people know. And then also, it's amazing how much people know. So you have to start with what you know. You have to make a contact list because you may not know what you need to know to get things going. So make a contact list of people, places, things that you need in order to make your event a success. Set a date. It doesn't have to be this year. Today is February the 6th. We're not saying 5 months from now on the 4th of July, you're going to get everybody together. It may be the 2026 or beyond. Set a date where you would put some time in the sand to get something like this started, get some help. And that can be help with family members or others. People like historical societies, libraries, and on what you'll learn can assist you in your endeavor. And then you're going to have to make a plan. You just can't just pop up and decide, hey, it's family reunion, and then just like say, everybody show up, on the 4th of July this year at the park, and I'll see you there. Without that structure and without a plan, um, it won't go the way it's intended, and somebody will end up being disappointment. Maybe not you because you started the idea, but people that participate may have plenty to say if it doesn't turn out the way they expected. So you have to manage those expectations. Some other reunion essentials, right? Before you get started, and we call it a family reunion, unless you're just having a community gathering, which we talked about in the history of family reunions here in the United States, it could just be that your connection to an organization that has historically Black connection. But if you're starting out with your family unit, there's some things you need to know. You either decide to organize around a surname, like my last name's McFadden. So if I wanted to start to have a McFadden family reunion, I would do just that and start organizing around the surname or a common ancestor. And that common ancestor may or may not, you may not share the same last name with that ancestor, but who was great grandma Tabitha Love is mine. So who was Tabitha Love, who lived in Cabarrus County in 1904 in Cabarrus County, North Carolina? So Tabitha Love has many descendants. And so starting out with that common ancestor is a starting point for people that may have a relationship. The family story is essential. And when I say a family story, you have to start with what you know about your family story, but then it's something that has to be repeated in some level or shape or form at the event because it's so important. It is the anchor or the framework upon which you build the rest of your event. So that family story has to be told. And you can do it through documentation. You can do it orally. You can have a elder or the family historian can tell that story, but make sure you're imparting and communicating that story in that space. That happens a lot of times by you getting a family tree. And so we can talk a little bit about how to get a family tree started. But a family tree, people know who their parents were. They start with themselves, who their parents were, and so on and so forth, going back in time, finding out that family tree, and everyone, all the branches of your total family tree, there are going to be other family trees. So you want to collect those because you may find opportunities to fill in the blanks in your direct lineage. You need a budget. You just can't say, hey, let's have a family reunion. You don't understand how much it's going to take to plan the activities. Everything is not free. There are some things that I've gathered for you as being a participant in this particular webinar, but you need to think about a budget and what that's going to be. And then lastly, for essentials, I mean, you can be a one woman or one man show, but probably is not going to turn out as well as you would like. So think about what a committee would look like for you. They don't all have to be relatives. There are other people that can serve and participate for you. So you want to make sure you have a committee. And then, as I mentioned, the family story becomes the foundational component of the event. And so what are some of the essentials of a family story in order to compile it so it can be delivered successfully? The first thing you want to do is make sure it's documented. Do you have a recording of an elder telling a story about the family? Do you have a written document that an ancestor wrote down so that you have it? Is there a repository, something like an Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne or someplace that has captured your family's history or in a surname or something? Is there a story? So let's start with that documentation, and then let's start filtering through that documentation and finding out who's who. May be names that are listed in the family story that you don't recognize. It's really important to understand the kinship or your link to the names in that story so that you can sort those things out. Once you do the who's who and some documentation, you've read things along, you want to come up with a research plan. So two types of plans: plans for the event and a research plan to build out that family story. And often that research plan requires, guess what? You have to start talking to people and actually talking to people, picking up the telephone, not texting, right? Not sending, don't do that. Interview. So you're going to have to put together some resources, and the syllabus for this presentation will do exactly that, give you some resources of how to conduct an oral interview as it relates to family history. It gives you some suggestions for questions and suggestions for approaches. It's important. So otherwise, in equipment, you are so blessed. In 10 years, there's so much technology that can help you with this. You would be surprised. There's so many things that you can do that are free. So we can talk a little bit about that in the Q&A section. I won't labor it here, but there are so many things you can do with equipment. You don't have to go buy a microphone and spend a lot of time with expensive equipment like you see on TV, like the Henry Louis Gates, "Who do you think you are?" and that kind of stuff, right? It's just not happening like that. You can start with your mobile phone. Your mobile device can be a start, right? Your computer, if we're talking on laptop, we can do that. I can show you how to do that or talk to you about that. So there's different ways for that to happen. But it doesn't matter once you do a recording or interview and you record, you have to record it, by the way. Don't just have to sit down and talk to somebody and not record or memorialize your interview. It's very important that you do so. If you don't have an old-fashioned tape recorder that's still laying around from your family, you'll have to use some of the technology to do that. And we'll talk about that. But if you don't transcribe it, that means turn it into written format, black and white, something that someone can read. Then again, it's all for naught as you start merging those information together and putting those family stories together. But now that you have some essentials as it relates to your family story and the family event, you need to focus on 3 areas. And those 3 areas are, remember, we talked about the family tree. You're not going to be able to do that without doing some work and rolling up your sleeves on a family tree. You want to think about 1870. That's important in African American research, particularly. Because 1870 was the first time many freedom-seeking ancestors were enumerated in the U.S. Census, which happens every 10 years. And so if you can find your ancestry back to 1870, it lets you, A, go further, B, it gives you a lot of different things that you can talk about during family reunions and base it on various themes. But the other area of focus that people often have oversight. So say, for example, my family's from North Carolina. Maybe the first thing I would do is like, "Ooh, I need to go back to where grandma, where everybody grew up, where I was born and stuff like that." Don't do that. Start right where you are right here. You want to start locally first. You'd be surprised at the number of connections that the historical societies have, the museums have, places like the Ohio History Connection that can help you jumpstart your journey without you just picking up and driving or going across the country only to be disappointed because A, you didn't have a plan, and you didn't have enough information, you ran out of time. Like I mentioned, you have to know operating hours and doing your research. So if you go down to see Geraldine on Monday, she won't be there, right? You've got to do your homework and understand when these places are open, and they're not all open every day of the week. The county society that I support and lead is a perfect example. We're only there twice a week. So if you don't know what our hours are, if you want to see someone in person to get that that personal touch, you need to do your research. But start locally first, do that homework so you won't be disappointed when you start investing and traveling to the destination, or if it's not one and the same, where your ancestors once lived and walked the earth. So remember I talked about family tree? You're going to jumpstart your family tree in a couple of ways, right? The first way to do that is going to do a relative checkup, right? What do I mean by relative checkup? Are you in touch with any of your relatives? Did you grow up with any of them? I didn't really grow up with a lot of my relatives because my parents decided to migrate and leave the place, the state of origin. So I didn't grow up with any of them. So do you have a relative checkup? Is there a first cousin or some kinfolk that you can give a call and say, hey, what do you know about our family tree? So that you can start filling in the blanks. The next stop after you get some information from your relatives is a local library. You would be surprised, at least here in Ohio, I have not been disappointed. I don't know of a library, a major library system, when I say, at least countywide, that doesn't have a local history section. Genealogy and local history. And if they don't have one, they have a connection with the next largest library system that's close by that they can put you in touch with the local history librarian. And guess what they can do? They can help you with your family research. So they will often have this picture of what I have here, the 4-generation chart, and they will have the local materials that will help you jumpstart that family tree if you don't have that documentation already. And so that's how you jumpstart that family tree work that needs to be filled in. What about 1870? I told you needed to jumpstart 1870. Well, the way you start with getting back to 1870 is finding out who was alive in your family in 1950. The reason why we picked 1950 is because United States Census records come out decennially. In other words, they release a new set of records every 10 years, but it's based on a rule of 72. So in other words, they wait for 72 years after the event to release those records. So the last time that the United States Census, and we have in the United States been taking a census of the United States population since 1790, right? And so it is 2025. That's a pretty long time. But the most available record for you now in 2022 was the last time they released census, and that would be 1950. They won't release the 1960 census to guess when? 7 years from now. So you have to use 1950 as a starting point if you haven't started already. And then you find out who was alive in 1950, and then you follow that family unit back every 10 years to the extent possible. If you get stuck, target 100 years as your first goal. So let's just say my goal is to get back. If you haven't started this before, you want to try to get back to 1920, right? Because this is 2025. So 100 years back would be 1925. The censuses happen on every 10 years. So 1960, 70, 80, 90, that way. So there wouldn't be one in 1925, but there was a census in 1920. So start that with your target. That means you have what? 1, 2, 3, 4 censuses to look at, right? Where you need to find your relatives. It's not a daunting task if you think of it that way, breaking the work down in chunks. So 1950, 1940, 1930, and 1920. You're going to try to find those first. And if you can do that, what a great reunion, because you can have themes for every decade. If you don't have a family reunion theme, you can focus it around that. So targeting the first 100 years, even though the ultimate goal is to get back to 1870. And then you need to watch some videos, right? All of you like to be, just like you joined here tonight with your bunny slippers on. You just want to get information and not go anywhere. I recommend watching videos. This is not a place, and although the History Connection can help you with beginning genealogies, there's just a plethora of resources everywhere about beginning African American genealogy. There are live presentations. We just had one last month with our African American interest group in Columbus. There are just so many. I won't spend time doing that, but you can watch a video for about an hour. And in this handout, I've given you two great examples by two women who've done a lot of research in this space. One is Janice Gilliard. She is on the board of the National Genealogy Society. And then LaJoy Mosby is the president of the African American Genealogy and Historical Society, which is yeah, that's right. So it's a national chapter with, I don't know, 60, 70 branches across the United States, but she's the president. And both of these women have done some amazing introduction to African American genealogy videos, only 1 hour of your time to get you started if you don't know where to start with this type of research in 1870. As far as local research, there's several ways that you can jumpstart local research. The first I would recommend is checking out the museums and historical societies in your ancestors' locale. So when I say start local, where is that oldest ancestor from? If it's not in the area in which you live now, you may want to reach out and contact those museums and historical societies in those areas. The second is your local museum historical society. Again, you would be surprised how much they can do to connect you with various places. There's also something that's funded by the Smithsonian. Those are called regional history centers. We have several of them in this region. And if you can Google those if they have a Smithsonian affiliation. That's another area where you can jumpstart local research as far as family reunion based or genealogy or family history based. Your local area chamber of commerce, you would be surprised what they have about family reunions. Why? If they're trying to attract tourists and travelers, they want to be able to market the fact that they are family friendly, and they have accommodations to host a family reunion or a type of reunion event. If it's not family based, it could be a high school reunion. We talked about organizations and so on and so forth. And so they will market to reunion and give you tools and resources that you can leverage. Local universities, another place that people don't think about that has that does their own reunions, right? Alumni reunions, but they cover other information on family reunions and other gatherings of people with local ties. And then something else that's overlooked a lot of times is the National Park Service. Part of their mission and intent at National Park Service locations is to chronicle the history of the region. So the park ranger is a walking historian. They have a lot of information, not only about the location that they support, but other information that's online for the National Park Service that's historical in nature. And they do have quite a bit. Since they deal with land, there's things about land grants and people moving into the area. So there's a lot of different things that the National Park Service can do to support your research on an area. Online sources and offline sources. So I'm here talking about those now. So this is just a selection. There'll be more information that I'll offer you in the syllabus, and we can get into Q&A, but some of the places that I would start to look at right away, there is a historical legacy that talks a little about the history that I covered on Black family reunions at the Smithsonian. And they have a traveling museum exhibit, as well as other information there. St. Bonaventure College, believe it or not, has a family reunion planning checklist for African Americans. So I don't know very much about St. Bonaventure, but awfully glad that they had some information out there for Black family reunions. Black Family Union, myblackfamilyreunion.org has information about its mission and intent. It's been going strong for almost 40 years, and it has information about different urban areas and other places that are doing reunions on a regular basis in the reunion season. The Wright Museum, which is in Detroit, has a National Black Family Month that they celebrate, and I believe that's August, and so they have exhibits supporting materials for you there. Another example, if you haven't had a family search, if you haven't had a wiki account, the familysearch.org is a place that everyone should set up a free account if they're working on their family tree. The family local history centers are places where you can go, and Family Search is run by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and so they have a mission to help everyone make ancestral discoveries, and so they can help you with jump starting your research. They're right down the road in Centerville, I believe. There's one by, that's the closest one by NAAMCC, but there's one in Columbus, there's one in Mansfield, there's one outside of Greater Cleveland. There are about, I don't know, 11 or 12 of them across the state of Ohio that can also help you. And if you're beyond, you can take a look. The family history centers, once you get into the wiki, they can pinpoint where you are and tell you where the closest family history center is and research library is to help you. And then 10 Million Names. 10 Million Names is a venture by American Ancestors, which is the New England Genealogy and Historical Society. They have launched a 10 Million Names, which is an opportunity to be a part of a research project to reclaim over 10 million names of ancestors prior to the Civil War that are minimally documented, either not through our own family research or just being stories untold, because the repositories focus on mainstream history and not the history of all Americans. And so those are some online sources that can help you get started with your family reunion. Offline resources, I didn't talk about brick and mortar places. I talked about these 4 books have been instrumental in helping me with my family history and reunion. So you can also have virtual reunions. I forgot to mention that. But all of these books give you an example of what you can do to start your family reunion experience. So the Black Family Reunion Cookbook, food is the center of most family gatherings, and so it gives you some recipes and some history of some of the historic recipes that people use culturally in the African American community, but it also has anecdotes about gatherings, family gatherings, and so I find it really great. And How to Plan Your African American Family Reunion, another great resource. The Family Reunion Planner has some worksheets, but you will have a workbook as a part of participating in this presentation. And so these 4 resources from an offline perspective are places where you can get started and kick the journey off or refine what you already have in flight. But like I said, some options for people that are far flung with a lot of the, I don't know, airfare has just gotten ridiculous. I just looked for a North Carolina airfare just down to Raleigh, North Carolina was like $400 round trip. It's not cheap anymore. So maybe some ideas for first starting that first reunion. You can use technology, and if you come in 2 weeks, I'll be talking about some of that technology that you can use to fuel your family history journey, and also hold events where people can talk and about their family history, and you can just have a full-blown event online if you'd like, as opposed to, it doesn't take the place of a real face-to-face reunion, but it can be a supplement or be a building block to moving to that full-fledged on-site experience. All right. So at this point, I'm looking at the time, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I'm very thankful for those of you that have spent time with me this evening. Uh, this is my email and my telephone number if you want to jot it down, but you'll be getting some resources afterwards. I really appreciate this time spending just giving you a high-level overview of what you can do now that you're the family historian. I've given you enough tools so that you could take the time to become one. But if you have some questions right now, I'd like to answer those if you have them available. So Geraldine, take it away. Thank you for your time.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing in a minute, but first I'll
I'm
ask.
going to stop sharing. You want me to?
Let me see if I can. Yeah,
All right,
that's
I
what you
stopped
got.
sharing.
That's right. You got to stop because
Yeah, I got to stop sharing.
because I can't figure out what to do. Okay, so I have a question that was in the Q&A, and I answered it from our organization perspective, but it basically said what types of archives do you have? And I think they meant us,
Okay,
the National African American Museum. And we have archives, but in terms of, and specifically for Cleveland, I'm not sure what we have, but Cecilia gave some good resources. And another place you could probably go is our Ohio History Connection Archives Library here in Columbus. I hope everybody can see the answer. So they have limited hours, but they do have birth and death records. So Cecilia, can you kind of touch on that? If
sure.
you saw
So
somebody
they're looking for archives in a particular part of the state because I can't
yeah,
see the map.
Cleveland. Yeah, Cleveland. I'm
Cleveland.
sorry.
So Cleveland, so there is the Western Reserve, okay, and the
Mhm.
Greater Cleveland Research Center. Okay, so you want to head there for that experience. So the Western Reserve Historical Society, or let me see if I'm saying it correctly, but that's the place, and I think they've rebranded themselves as the Greater Cleveland. Let me make sure that I give you the right thing. That's where I would go for Cleveland for the archives. And then the Cleveland Public Library is an amazing, amazing place too. So CPL, Cuyahoga County, you have a variety of resources in Greater Cleveland to jumpstart your research. The Cleveland Public Library at the Lewis Stokes downtown, the top floor, they have a local history and genealogy center that's very extensive. Yeah. So that's where I would start if I was in Cleveland. I'd start with CPL, and you can call them. You can make a virtual appointment with them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm going back through. Oh, got a new message. Let's see. Oh, it was everybody saying thank you, wonderful presentation, and I totally agree. But I want to go, I think there were some questions in the chat earlier
Okay.
that you may have covered, I think from Christopher K. Um, he said, what are some good questions to ask your elder family members when you're trying to uncover your family history?
That's great. So you're going to get some of those questions in I'm going to give you a script. But some of the things, first of all, let me give you some pointers about folks. You don't want to ask closed-in questions, right? So you don't want to say, "Hey, did you live did you live in North Carolina? Did you fight in World War II?" Yes, then that's it, right? You don't get a chance to talk about anything else, right? The best thing is to kind of break things down and ask them. And oh, by the way, wartime is not what you start with in an interview, okay? Because of how veterans feel, that's a sidebar. You're not gonna say, what was it like, on Vietnam and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Don't do it don't start out like that. You want to ask them what it was like growing up in fill in the blank. Describe a memory, a childhood memory, fill in the blank. That's how you start, right? So uh so there's a variety of things. So depending on what you want to find out. So those are some of the questions. So, great uncle Charles, what was it like growing up in Alabama in the 50s? Great Uncle Charles, what's your first memory of after you got married? Great Uncle Charles, what was your experience in school Or do you remember any of your classmates and some of the things that you like to do? Great Uncle Charles, can you remember your first vacation? All of those type of things give an opportunity to have an open dialogue, and you'd be surprised what comes up, you know. Who was, did you, who was the oldest living relative that you had, Uncle Charles, while growing up? Did you ever visit relatives while you were growing up? Questions like that are open-ended, start a dialogue, build a sense of trust and confidence in what you're trying to accomplish, and they don't feel like you're just trying to extract information. So I'll tell you one bad experience I had. So it was around the turn of the century, and I was working with a relative, and it was 1999. Everybody remember that far? And I was like, why don't you ever talk about anything? Because at that time people were saying the year of the end. And this relative told me, you have 30 minutes and don't ever ask me anything else again. So you don't want to turn it into that. Now, I wasn't a genealogist at the time, but what I did was close the door on what could have been an open experience of information, because I asked a closed-ended question and because I seemed like I was badgering, you know what I'm saying, and nagging them, as opposed to respecting their space and giving them information.
Okay. And I
All right.
have two questions
Mhm.
left, real quick.
Yep.
Well, Darlene says she's hit a brick wall. What are some resources to get beyond this? But she didn't really say what
Yeah, I
the
don't know what
wall
type of brick
was.
wall, Darlene.
So if you get maybe a
Elaborate a little bit on what your brick
yeah,
wall is.
okay, if she hasn't
Is
left
it a
already.
male ancestor, a female ancestor? Is it a location? You can't get a birth or a death record. What's the brick wall?
Right. And if we
Mhm.
don't get your question answered tonight, like I said, I'm Cecilia. I'm going to send Cecilia's contact information. You can go ahead and just uh, email her your maybe some more details. The
Mhm.
last question is I'm interested in identifying any descendants from the Samuel Gist settlement in Ohio.
Mhm.
They
And
said,
Elizabeth's absolutely correct about that.
yeah,
So Highland County is where I would go. And then
right.
also, Peggy, the Ohio Genealogy Society, OGS, in Belleville, Ohio. They have, you can pose that question to them. They do have some family histories and other things about the settlement. I work, I do some things on settlements, but it's been a little while since I did that. So the Ohio OGS library, check with their librarian in Belleville, Ohio. That's another resource statewide.
Okay, and I also want to thank Elizabeth for pointing out a resource at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati that they have a family search center there. So thanks a lot, Elizabeth, for sharing your information. Let's see if anybody else. Okay. Somebody says, well, Brown County has two
They
gist
do,
settlements.
Peggy. But again, start with OGS if you haven't reached out to them. And the GIST, they do have more than multiple settlements. So you're well on your way, because you do at least understand the different places. And have you checked with Claremont County Library, Peggy? That's the other place. If you're looking for GIST information, Claremont County Library.
Yeah, she said yes.
Yes.
Check
Okay.
with them.
All
Okay.
right.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I guess, we're gonna pick this back up on February 20th, and hopefully I'll have my experience. I'm gonna practice some more.
Oh, we're gonna be ready to go next time. Boo, boo,
Yeah,
boo,
yeah,
boo.
yeah, yeah. But we are gonna share this recording. Give me about a week to send the recording to you. I'm gonna try to get some of my boo-boos edited out. But we do appreciate you guys' time and great questions and enthusiasm. And Cecilia's such a gem at doing this. And
I
you
love it.
know, if you like, let us know too if you'd like for us to do something live at the museum.
Yeah,
Or
I would like to do live at the museum. Tell me you want to do live at the museum. We
right. If
can
we
do
maybe
that.
do
It's gonna fun. We
something,
can do some hands-on stuff. So
yeah.
Diane, tell them, send her an email. You've got the email for Ohio history, and we can do some hands-on. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
get in the room and bang it out. Let's do it.
yeah, because we can do something once the weather breaks. How about that?
Yeah, yeah, let's not do it now, because we
yeah,
had
but
a
we
little
can do
ice storm
something.
yesterday. Let's not
Yeah,
do it now.
basically we can do it on a Saturday when it's convenient for everybody. So thanks
Mhm.
again for joining us, and I hope we see you on February 20th, and you will get some email with all this information. So thanks so much and have a great rest of the evening.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.